Imagine you just get to the river. You're just getting out of your truck, getting your stuff on, doing all the things. And out of nowhere, this mysterious man, he approaches and he tells you this. He tells you you have all day to catch a trout, just one trout. However, you can only use one type of fly. You can use that fly multiple times, different ones of it, but you can only use one specific fly pattern. He tells you if you fail, you never can fly fish again, as he will cast a spell that will take away all of your ability to fly fish. He then vanishes into the fog, and he's nowhere to be seen. Now, I hope this never happens to me or any of you, but it does raise a great question. What fly are you going to go with? Do you have a go-to, always sure thing fly? I certainly do. And in today's episode of BOC with Ketter, we will talk all about what's going on, guys. Welcome back to an episode of Beverage with Ketter. This will be episode 5, season 1 of Beverage with Ketter. What do we got today? What do we got? Ooh, that's right. That's a Dunkin'. America does run on it. Fun fact, I used to be addicted to Dunkin' Donuts coffee. In college, I drank it outrageous amount. Go there in the morning with my buddy, and we would get a large coffee. I think they were like $2.86 back in the day. Get a large coffee, go to work, school, whatever, do whatever we had to do, and then we would go back there in the afternoon and get another large Dunkin' coffee, head down to the beach, lay in the sun, play some volleyball, drink some beer. Yeah, we had a pretty good life. But so you hear me mention this a lot in my videos. Peyton hears me mention it in my everyday life. She calls it a BWO. BWO, guys. That is my go-to favorite fly. What does that stand for? It stands for blue-winged olive. And I specifically am talking about the adult form of this, as that is my favorite fly to use, and that would be the dry fly of the BWO. So the BWO is a subcategory of the Baetis family of insects. Really, BWO is a collective term that we kind of use and understand in the fly fishing world. It's just a way of identifying a large group of mayflies that really have kind of that olive or tan or brownish kind of bodies, and then that bluish kind of wings. BWO, blue-winged olive. So that is what we're talking about when we refer to as a BWO, my favorite fly. So I fell in love with this fly about, I think it was 2 years ago on Minnesota Trout Opener on our yearly trip with the boys. I was very new in the fly fishing world of dry fly fishing. Up until that point in my life, it was really just nymphing, and that was it. I didn't even know how to streamer fish. I knew about dry flies and how you kind of use them, but every time I used them, it was just pathetic. Like I couldn't even figure out how to cast it. I hated it. I was like, this is not it. So I really was getting to that point where I wanted to learn that. And my buddy and I, we came up on a big BWO hatch, big mayfly hatch. It just rained. This is mid-April, perfect time. Just rained, and then the sun came out, and then the water just came alive. There was bugs, mayflies everywhere, and the trout were in an absolute frenzy. I looked at my buddy. I'm like, you know, what's going on? This is crazy. And he's like, well, this is a mayfly hatch. We matched the hatch, and we had a great time pulling trout on the BWOs. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, this is cool. This is fly fishing. Like, you're out sending these little flies, and the trout are coming up and smacking it. So that's really how I started to learn how to catch fish on the dry. And that specific fly was what I used, and it stuck with me for the rest of my fly fishing career. All right. So there's a ton of different ways to tie the BWO, to get the BWO. There's the cripples. There's just so many different versions of the fly. And really, you know, any of them work great, but I personally prefer the Parachute BWO. So I'll give you a little look at that here. That is what we're talking about. This is a very small one. And that Parachute is what I really enjoy here. It just helps with visibility on the water, because as you can see, this is extremely small and not easy to see at all. So that Parachute, you grease it up with some some bug juice, and then it helps it float and helps you have visibility of your fly so you can see when it actually gets eaten. So that's my favorite version of it. I know there's hundreds of different ways people use the BWO, and whatever works for you, but I prefer that Parachute. So I use this fly honestly almost year round. It doesn't work well in the dead of winter. However, you've seen in a couple videos back that I did use it to catch some trout on a midge hatch that was happening on a warmer day this winter. So you can use it when it's warmer and there is a midge hatch going on. It's not replicating a midge by all means, but it works, at least for me in the driftless. So I do still tie it on in the winter if I do see some hatches going on. But again, it's something that you can pretty much use year round in the driftless. It's a do-it-all fly. It's a fly that wears many hats, in my opinion. It's great in the spring, early spring, May, April. Fantastic time to use it, even in March if it's starting to get warm enough and that ice is starting to melt. Works well all summer, at least for me it does. Even in those dog days of summer, I find myself tying on a Parachute BWO more times than none if it's not hopper season yet. Once hopper season comes, it's a pretty easy switch to go over to the hopper because it's just so much fun. And then again in the fall time, those are early spring and early fall are typically the best times for the BWO to start hatching those mayflies. But again, this thing works year round. So when it comes to sizes, the BWOs, they range from anywhere from like size 12 up to like 22. Me personally, I like to use anything from about 14 to 20. These littler ones are using more so in the winter. I'm using those little ones to kind of work on those midge hatches as they're going to be smaller. So I've been using those smaller ones here and there in the winter time, but once it kind of rolls around that 18, 16, that is the perfect size for me starting in the spring. And I rarely go away from that unless I'm putting on a dropper. I'll ramp it up just a little bit to get a bigger size. Or if I notice there is some bigger mayflies hatching, I'll go ahead and put on a bigger one. But I will say personally, the smaller the BWO dry fly, for me, the better success I have had. So we have talked a little bit about, visibility. It's a hard fly to see. There's no questions about that. One thing that, I like to do, and most fly fishermen do this with their dry flies. I do this with all of them, but you need to lube it up. This is just bug juice. Put that on the Parachute part of the BWO, which is why I like this fly so much. So it'll go on that white part there. Just get a little bit. You don't have to put a ton on there. Lube that up. Kind of mix it in there with your fingers. And then I like to throw a few casts. Maybe I'll catch a fish right away with that. After a couple casts, I do take it in, and then I do put it in some easy dry, some Loon easy dry. Shake it around a little bit. Might scare some other fishermen because they might think it's a rattlesnake, especially in the driftless. Shake it up. That'll kind of get that water off of it, make it dry, and then I'm good to fish for a while. A lot of guys, just use bug juice or lube. A lot of guys just use this. I prefer to start out with the juice, a couple casts, get it out in the water, and then I like to dry it off. That's just my method. Do whatever works for you, but that always works well for me. I'm able to fish as long as I need to and still have good visibility of that BWO when I do this combination. Maybe after an hour or so, got to pull in and do it again. Or if you're steadily catching fish, it's going to get beat up. The BWO is going to get beat up. I have some in my box that are absolutely destroyed from fish just munching on them. So yeah, you will have to take care of them. Make sure that they are still kind of intact every so often, especially if they are getting hit hard. So, more about that too, the visibility part. It can get really frustrating. Like the first couple times I used this fly, I was like, what am I doing? This makes zero sense. I cannot see it. Do the fish see it? Is it sinking to the bottom? Is it even on the top of the water column? I didn't know. But that part really gets you dialed in on the dry fly fishing. You have to make good casts. You have to make delicate, soft casts. They need to just and kiss on top of the water and almost just glide down. Then you're able to see it for the most part. So once you dial that part in and understand that that's what you need to do, you get your eyes kind of adjusted to understanding how hard you actually have to focus on this little bitty fly while you're sending it out into moving water. Once you kind of understand that process, it makes a lot more sense, and you're able to see it. You should be able to see it almost every time you cast it out if you're doing everything right. And you should be able to just focus in on that, focus in, focus in, focus in. And as soon as a fish comes up, you know, you're having a good time. So if you can get everything right, it's going to take some time. Don't get frustrated with this fly. First couple times you're probably going to be like me and be like, what am I doing? This makes zero sense, especially if you're having a great day nymphing, because nymphing's nymphing. You can go out there, throw on your favorite nymph, throw on your indicator, and have yourself a 30 fish day. Granted, you know, conditions and everything like that. But if you want to ramp it up a little bit and do that dry fly, it's a great place to start. And this specific fly will get you absolutely dialed in, and you will start to feel amazing, and you'll start to feel like a fly fishing god when you can send that little guy out there, sits on top, kisses that water, rides down that seam or that column, wherever you're trying to put it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you just see that whoop, and it's on. And we are, you know, specifically talking about my favorite fly in specific, which is this BWO Parachute dry fly, which is replicating that adult form. However, you can use this you can match this in the Nymph, Emerger, and dry fly adult. So super cool, because if you know that hatch is kind of going on and that's what they're eating, and if you're going to do like a dry dropper, which I do quite a bit with the BWO as well, I'll put on a bigger dry fly, and then I will drop a little nymph down here that looks just like this. It's got that green olive-ish body as well. Let's see here, show you the backside. Yeah, I'll throw that on a lot, and that's perfect beaded BWO nymph. You get that going with the dry on top. You're matching 2 out of the 3 life cycles there, and almost through this coffee. All right, so that's a little rundown on the BWO dry fly so far. Cool story about a BWO in my experiences. Last trout opener, we had some family kind of come down and join us on the trip, and I took my future father-in-law and future brother-in-law out for the day to do some fishing. My brother-in-law, he never fly fished, likes to be in the outdoors, likes everything outdoors. But I was determined to get him on a trout on the fly rod. I was like, if I can get him on one, he might fall in love with it. So I started him out on a nymphing rig. He was throwing that around. Didn't have much luck, and I had the BWO on, and I was having some decent luck. I was pulling fish here and there, missing a few here and there. So eventually I was like, you know what? Here you go, bud. You can have my TFO. It's got the BWO on it. It's working. There's mayflies everywhere. Just take a look at the water, take a look in the air. It's happening. Gave him a brief rundown on, you know, what this is, what to do, and just kind of get after it. We came up to a good section, and I just told him, hey, throw it out there a couple times. We'll see what happens. He pretty much got dialed right away. He was sending good casts out into these nice, good riffles. There was trout rising constantly in there. So it was a matter of time. You could just anticipate when that trout was going to happen. But it was funny because he's like, every time he's throwing it, he's like, I can't see it. Can you see it? And a lot of times I was like, yeah, I can see it. But there was those times where I could not see it either, because that just happens sometimes, especially when you're not the one casting it. I feel like that's a little harder. But it was just hilarious because he's like, I can't pick this up. I don't see it at all. He was sending a couple good ones, and I was like, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing everything right. And you could just kind of feel it in the air. And all of a sudden, boom, he got absolutely crushed by a nice, decent brown trout. It crushed his dry fly. You could just see it come out of the water. And I knew right then and there, I was like, oh, he's on. The trout took it, turned its head. I yelled at him, raise that rod as high as you can. And boom, he did that. Hook set, perfect. We had a fish on. He battled it in, netted it. Just a super special moment to pull that trout. And we got a cool picture with it. I was fired up. He was fired up. Father-in-law was watching on the side. He was fired up. Just a cool experience. I don't know too many people who catch their first trout on the fly rod with a dry fly. So it's pretty cool to get that accomplishment done. Normally you start out nymphing like everyone does, but really cool to see that happen. So again, just another example of my confidence in that BWO. All right, so as we kind of come to a close here, a little more coffee. Hope you guys are sipping something good as well. But yeah, in conclusion, this is my favorite fly, hands down. You can probably pick that up. I just see my enthusiasm and just watching my videos and seeing the fish I catch. 80% of the time, it's coming off the BWO. Honorable mentions, I love to streamer fish now as well. I find that an absolute thrill. Nothing wrong with streamer fishing. And then nymphing too. I have a go-to nymph that I love to use. I love to use a pink squirrel. I love to use a rainbow warrior, parachute. Or sorry, not a parachute. Prince nymph. I love those in the nymphing world too. Don't get me wrong, but this is the one for me. So, you know, if I ever do get approached by these mysterious fish gods with their outrageous requests, I do feel pretty good going to battle with my BWO parachute dry fly. Minus in the dead of winter, that would be a bad hypothetical because my rights of being a fisherman might be taken from me if that's what I'm going out in February with. Don't know if I'm going to catch a fish. Any other time of the year, give me that BWO. We're going to go out. We're going to figure out where the trout are, and we are going to have some fun on that BWO. Thanks, guys. Cheers.